Hello, everybody. Time for the Q1 2017 Quarterly Analysts Hangout. Something that I try to do every 3 months or so as a benefit to the folks at the analyst level, the co-executive producer level. Anybody who's helping us out at $1 a show, that's the $20 a month level, gets a chance to ask questions live while we're in the Slack. If you ever have questions at this and you're not able to support at that level, you can always just email them, feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com, and we'll try to get to them as they come along. Pokes are going to be popping in throughout the hour, hopefully. Rich from lovely Cleveland has arrived.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going, brother?
It's going pretty good. Just enjoying a lovely Saturday.
Oh, fantastic. And, of course, Roger Chang, our producer, jumping in. How's it going, Raj?
Good. Sorry. I was having netcam issue. I don't know.
Netcam.
Webcam.
An old tech TV phrase.
Webcam.
I like it.
Issues. It's Google Hangouts. It just doesn't want to work sometimes.
Well, cool. One of the things I always do on this update is sort of let you know where we are with funds. And I've changed up how I do it every time I do it. So, you know, if you have particular questions, again, email them to us and we'll get to them in the next analyst hangout, or you can ask them in Slack. Gadget Chaser, for instance, is asking in Slack right now, does the Slack actually cost us anything? A financial question. No, we don't pay for the Slack. At a certain point, if it gets to where the folks in the Slack who are supporting us at the highest level want a feature that you need to pay for Slack to get, we might do that. But right now we don't need to. We just use everything that's there for free. How do you guys feel about Discord? That would be something I would float out there, because Patreon actually integrates with Discord, where you can give people certain roles based on their patronage. Do either of you guys use it?
I have not used it.
I've never used it. I've heard a lot of good things. We mostly use Slack at my work. I would also think maybe not having it roll. What's the Facebook business one? That's like a kind of like a Slack competitor.
Facebook
only
group.
because for the social features, but I'm not sure. The other, I actually just came across an open source project that lets you do kind of a host your own Slack.
Oh, cool.
Which lets you do full archiving and stuff like that. Obviously, you need to take care of the hosting and stuff, but I thought that was an interesting alternative too.
Yeah. What do you remember what it's called off the top of your head?
I actually posted it in my work Slack, so I can check just a second.
Yeah, take a look. So yeah, good question coming in. And T-Glass 1976 even says he prefers Slack over Discord. And I think most of the folks in our audience probably do, feature-wise, for the purposes that we use it for. If you don't know about our Slack, basically you back us at the $20 a month level, and once a month we invite all the new people in, and you get to chat with each other. There's a bunch of channels in there. A lot of people swapping tech tips, talking about things related to tech in their work and stuff like that. Howard also prefers Slack. So it's a cool community that's been building in there, and all of us are in there. I'm trying to get the co-host to jump in there more often. Of course, we're all busy too, so. And if
It's called Mattermost. Mattermost. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Mattermost. That's the open source one.
Open source.
Okay,
yeah.
cool. And then Gadget Virtuoso wants to point out HipChat was enterprise Slack before Slack. Haha.
Zoom.
If you're not familiar with Rich, by the way, Rich Stroffolino helps me out on Daily Tech Headlines, helping write the headlines. And anytime that I can't do headlines, you'll hear Rich's lovely voice on there. So thank you for doing that, man.
Absolutely.
I should also tell people, if you're not familiar with Daily Tech Headlines, you should probably check that out as well. See, now Howard's putting Mattermost a link in the Slack. So if you're in the Slack, boom, 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 you're getting this stuff. All right, let's take a look at the finances. Oh, wait, hold on. A Beatmaster in our regular chat says, "Can you link me to that?" Let me get that Mattermost link over there to Beatmaster. But yeah, finance-wise, we had a very good fourth quarter. Hold on, let me get back to the actual page that shows me that stuff. So yeah, we had nice rises in patronage from September to October, October to November, November to December, December to January was a drop. So we finished 2016 strong. It's not unusual to drop in January. It's after the holidays. Everybody starts looking at their bills and is like, need to pull back. And we had a drop January to February as well. So again, not a ton, not a huge drop. It's in the financial terms, it's really just flat, to be honest. But we're talking about the amount of pledges processed too, not the amount you see. The amount you see on the website is a best estimate based on history of what we would get. But then at the end of the day, it's what actually gets processed, what credit cards make it, and all of that sort of thing. So the reasons that people are giving, and by the way, if you do leave our Patreon, it's super helpful to tell us why. Vast majority of people leave because financial conditions changed. And I even get some very nice people who will write in and say like, I ran into this trouble. I'm really sorry. I hope to support again. And that's totally fine. I 100% understand, especially at this day and age. But the other reason is people who don't listen as much anymore. And that's going to happen too. I've had that happen to myself where, a podcast that I used to listen to all the time, I find myself just not listening to. And so that's fair too. I would say though, if it's a time matter, A, you can always skip. B, there's daily tech headlines, which is only 5 minutes a day. And C, there are other things that you can get besides just listening to the show. If you're getting some value out of the Slack, for instance, at that level, or if you're able to take advantage of the weekly update to kind of keep yourself up on the news when you don't have time to listen. We try to provide lots of different ways to take advantage of what we're doing without having to spend 30 to 40 minutes every day listening if you can.
Well, and I think kind of along those lines, the new Anchor.fm daily tech headlines is even more like if you really are compressing time and you literally have like a minute to catch up, that's like a super great because you can just grab it in bite size. Each individual headline is its own little chunk, and you can come back to it when you need to. It makes it really easy.
Yeah, if you hadn't heard about that, Ron Richards of All About Android and Damn Fine Podcast is doing that as well, and he kind of helped me get into it. It's an app called Anchor, Anchor.fm, if you want to find out more about it, and it has bite-size audio that you can flip through. So what we're doing with Daily Tech Headlines is we put in the little bits of the headlines individually. So that way you can listen to them, and if there's one like, oh, I heard that, or I'm not that interested in that, you could just swipe and move on to the next one. And I love being able to take advantage of other ways to distribute the content that we have. We also can take calls on that app.
Which is really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. We started getting some from people, just making comments or asking questions. So that's kind of fun too. You might want to check that out. Back to the questions. Howard says, do you have a schedule as to when you thank people on the episodes? Is it random, or do you have anniversary dates, etc.? That's a great question. The little thank yous that I give at the end, I usually pull from either PayPal or Patreon of people who have recently either just started pledging or changed their pledge. The thank yous to people on anniversary dates and stuff, I will do that sometimes. That's sort of random. So I pull from different sources, and there's a monthly update that goes to everyone on patreon.com that has thank yous based on anniversary dates and all of that as well. So but it's a good question. Maybe I should start putting some of that stuff in the main show as well. I don't know how you guys feel about that. One thing I don't think people are taking advantage of is the monthly update and the weekly update. So if you're at $1 a month, you get the monthly update. If you're at $5 a month, you get the weekly update. And because all of the episodes also go out by email, some people may just be blocking email or maybe go into their spam folder. But you may want to look at patreon.com/DTNS because we do have some really cool stuff going up there. Now we've just got people talking about how much they're supporting on Patreon in there, which is great, which is very cool. Let's see what else we got going on. Do you guys have any thoughts or questions before we move along?
Any chance those emails will stop?
Oh, any chance those emails will stop? Thank you, Gadget Virtuoso. Any chance those emails will stop? I think what he means is every post on Patreon causes an email, and it's all or nothing. So to make the Patreon-only RSS feed, which has the pre- and post-show work, I have to post it to Patreon, which then sends an email every day. What I do in the meantime, I've asked Patreon several times. Heather at Patreon knows this because I've been hammering her about it, to give me the opportunity to say, do not send an email for this post. They don't have that suggestion yet. So what I've asked, what I've done in the meantime is all of the posts that are just about episodes have the word full at the very beginning of the subject line. And if you're getting these emails and you want to see the weekly email and the monthly email, you can filter on an email from Patreon that has the word full in the title. Can go into a folder or even get deleted if you want. It won't affect your RSS feed at all. Obviously, it's still gonna post there. But that way, you don't have to get that email about the episode, but you will still see the emails that are the weekly update and the monthly update. Does that make sense, Roger?
Kind of.
What if you're not clear about it, then nobody's going to be clear about it. So what's confusing you about it?
Really, part of it is that I don't visit Patreon every day, so part of it is that I just flag all Patreon emails and they go automatically into my updates. So very rarely I notice them when they come in. But for example, I got one for the link to today's Hangout for the analysts. I mean, I don't really have too much of an issue with it.
But you just filter them all, right? And so
that's kind of
the
bad.
thing to do would be to filter just the ones that say full in the headline. But I get that's extra work, right? And I wish people didn't have to do that.
Is there?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Is there any way? I mean, would it be possible to just, if maybe people want to opt out of getting update emails entirely, which I don't necessarily think is a great idea, but if we gave an audio cue at the end when we know if those posts are going up regularly, just say, hey, remember to go to Patreon and check out the weekly.
I've been trying to do that in a kind of an offhand manner of like, hey, today I posted this topic, so that people think, but yeah, maybe we formalize that a little more, because they are. I mean, the weekly updates are every Thursday, and the monthly updates I think I have scheduled to go out on the 5th of the month every month. All right. Steve I says, based on the feedback from the survey, what are the things that are working well and what are the changes you want to make? It's with the survey, I was kind of testing the waters on a few different ideas, but also just checking in to see how things go. So shall we go through the survey results? You guys into that?
Sure.
Heck yeah.
So should Daily Tech News Show focus on more single topics? This is the idea that I've been pursuing of taking some of the load off of Daily Tech News Show from being the everything you need to know every day, which is a lot. 30 to 40 minutes, that's a lot if you're like, I just want to keep up. That's what Daily Tech Headlines is for. Hey, here's the top stories of the day. And having Daily Tech News Show be more about, here are the stories we can have an interesting conversation about. If there's something super important, we're going to mention it. We're not going to ignore super important things, but we won't try to go deep on the number of topics, kind of reduce those number of topics so that we can spend more time having a quality conversation on it. And it sounds like you guys are in sync with that. 39% said keep it as it is, but 50% said, sure, you can focus on more single topics, but don't lose all the top stories of the day.
I mean, it's one of those balancing things where you do want to at least nod to those stories that are trending that day. But one of the things that Tom and I were talking about is how do we want to approach some of these single topics? Do we want to have a group of people, like along with the contributors and a guest and stuff, to go really super in depth on these things, kind of like Charlie Rose, or do we want to do more of, and this is purely on approach, or do we want to do it more of a kind of a talk radio where it's just kind of banter kind of thing? Where I mean, I'm wondering if I'm making any sense.
Yeah, you are. I think we can mix it up too. Like we can have certain episodes where it's, a couple of top stories of the day. Again, never want, going on the survey, never want to eliminate that. But we might sit down with a guest and have a bit of a longer conversation about one topic. And maybe only have 3 or 4 top stories that day to make room for that. Another day would be, like you're saying, the more banter, where we have a couple of guests on to just kick around a topic, which is kind of what we normally do with our main topics.
And it's it's one of those ideas that Tom and I have always been kicking around, really, just to make sure that we do it, but at the same time we're not necessarily alienating people who aren't on that topic level. I guess if for example, if we go into Internet of Things security, do people who are not all that interested in that feel like they get left out because there is no other content within that show, kind of thing?
Well, and to be fair, you don't have to listen to every episode either, as long as we're still bringing a majority of topics that you enjoy, right? Next question: if DTNS became a slightly shorter show, say 20 to 30 minutes instead of 30 to 40, you would love it, wouldn't care, dislike it, hate it. And this is me responding to the people leaving our Patreon because they say they don't have time to listen anymore. And I'm like, okay, well, if we made this show a little easier, and I know a 20-minute show is a whole lot easier for me to keep up on than a 40-minute show, hour and a half show, especially daily. Hour and a half shows that are weekly, I have a hard time keeping up with. So our results were here, like 35% wouldn't care, 35% dislike, it's perfect as it is, and then only 9% would hate it. And I think that says a lot, whereas 20% would love it. So I don't know. I feel like that indicates we could shorten the show a little, keep it under 30 minutes, and people would be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I have part of me wants to do a shorter show because as a producer, I find it tends to liven up.
Yeah.
The stuff the discourse, because we are kind of like, okay, we're on the time limit. Sort of. That's
one of the compliments we generally get in our reviews, is that they like that we move the show along as it is. So,
sorry.
I was going to say that kind of goes along with what the last question in terms of focus and in terms of maybe shortening up the top stories. So instead of doing 4 to 5 headlines to start the show, getting it down to 2 or 3, maybe just making those more substantive discussions. And I mean, that's one way to shorten it up, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think those two kind of go hand in hand if that was an approach you'd be willing to take.
Yeah, and also, but we'll get to that. The next question is pie or cake. 44% pie. Whew, dodged a bullet there. Just edging out cake at 41%. I would have had to disown the audience.
What counts as 15% other, like donuts?
Yeah, I guess. Leave it. That was survey completionism. Is you never limit the options. You should always have a catch-all. So,
I do want to give a nod to Tech Dad, who mentioned at the Slack about our previous question. I like the pre and post show sometimes better than the actual show, especially if time is limited time or start to get behind. I mean, it's one of the things actually I think we've discovered is that people really enjoy our pre and post show discussions because they're not always necessarily tech related or even or tangentially related to the topics we've talked about. It could be something like, oh, I'm running late, and we'll have like a nice. I think it does add an element of cinema verte where people can kind of feel like, oh, I'm actually part of it. They're getting ready before the show, kind of thing. It's kind of cool.
Someone used to make a best of those for the patrons.
Yes, he did. They were great.
Pretty cool. Yeah, took a lot of time.
And then I made him help me with headlines instead. So that's my fault. What main discussion topic would you like to see discussed? This goes straight to that heart of, okay, instead of having another conversation about a cell phone that came out or the 100th story about Uber autonomous cars as our main topic on a day where we should mention those stories, but we could dig into more evergreen topics. What would you like to see? And we got a lot of great ideas. In fact, Some of these have already started to affect, the topics that we've been picking, right, Roger?
Yeah, I mean, like it's very interesting, and I'm not sure if someone just filled out the form multiple times, but security shows up. What?
Cognitive bias there is you're going to prioritize the first thing you see, and there's
no, but I've noticed that it does, that same topic does pop in throughout, not as regularly, of course, but it's I mean, it is something that I think people are very interesting. Although when they say security, are they talking just, I mean, security is a broad topic,
right?
Do you talk about infrastructure security? Do you talk about your home network security? Do you talk about online activity security? Do you talk about security issues, for example, things related to legislative things that might be either passed in law or submitted as a bill regarding the government's ability to see into your digital content without your permission, stuff like that. So it is. I do find it interesting that we did see one person put FOSS and Linux news in there, which is something I don't see very often mentioned in our just general emails.
Yeah, true. And again, this is more tell us some ideas, right? Yeah. So that we can think about whether there's something we want to rotate in. It's not a democratic vote that we're trying to take here. So even if there's only one, that puts it on our radar to think about. The shotgun approach you've been doing works great is another one that somebody said. Whatever is timely is one that somebody's saying, hey, make sure that we keep them. I think I want to keep hitting topics that are emerging and we haven't talked as much about. Right now, that's Internet of Things a little bit, although we're starting to have talked about that quite a bit. Machine learning, AI, autonomous cars, keeping in front of the technology that is interesting and we're learning more about, while keeping an eye on if there's anything really interesting happening in the mobile space or the app space.
Data security papers. I think, what was the one I saw very... I missed it.
Well, a lot of Internet of Things in here.
Yes.
Well, and that kind of definitely goes along with, concerns for security, or at least those two could definitely go together. And I think, I think the reason we're seeing a lot of interest maybe in more security topics is because we're kind of hitting a point where there needs to be a little bit more nuance, kind of like how we've gotten with net neutrality, where it's not just enough to, report on something as being, net neutral or not, that we're starting to get a little bit more shades of gray, and that the DTNS audience, I think, is really interested in learning about those nuances. And same thing with security, as we enter, an age where everything's going to have a sensor, everything's going to be connected. Security kind of shifts then at that point, and I think there's going to be, a lot of interesting areas to touch on in that.
I like this one. Surprise me. I think that's what we try to do. I'm going to skip past the guest ideas because we don't need to talk about them and discuss them here, but thank you for the guest ideas and keep them coming. We're always looking for new guests. Yes, we want Molly Wood on. Almost every one of you said that. We wish we could get her more often, but we will get her back. Do you listen to Daily Tech Headlines? Was just me trying to find out how many people in the DTNS audience where I was promoting this survey knew about it. And 67% said, no, I only listen to DTNS. 28% said, yes, I listen to both. And then there were a smattering of people who only listened to Daily Tech Headlines or did not know that Daily Tech Headlines existed, but most of you knew about it. There was a small percentage who said, no, I don't listen to either. How did I get into this survey anyway? Again, trying to be survey complete there. Brief news items before the top stories. That's something I've played around with. Like, what if we did a top 5 like brief headlines? Like, these are the things that are going on. And then the top stories is more the current discussion that we have, and then we have a longer topic. That might be too much, but it seems like a lot of you like that. You like having a little one-liner when it's just like, hey, Gmail updated so you can play video in the browser without having to download it. Isn't that cool? We don't need to have a big discussion about it, but it's a good thing to know.
like it, like a doping.
Some people are confused by it because they're like, well, why are you bringing it up if you're not going to talk about it? I don't understand the functionality. How are they any different from the top stories? They seem like brief items we won't talk about or explain, but here's a headline. Yeah. But sometimes that's all you need. Like, I think that Gmail one is a perfect example. Like, you can now play video embedded in Gmail instead of downloading the video. There's not much else to talk about, is there? Am I wrong?
I think part of it is because maybe not that story, but there might be there have been a couple episodes where we have done kind of where we do the pre-news news notice, and you and whoever, Justin or Scott or Patrick will talk about it a little bit more, which makes it seem just like
it's a top story. Yeah,
the top story. So,
well, and that's just us not executing very well. So that, maybe what that is. 100% of you responded you are ready. I'm very happy to hear that.
That's great.
How important is the recording time of DTNS to you? Because this is another thing I'd like to have, is the flexibility to do what we did with Lertad. Patrick and I are talking to another guest that he had on the Phileas Club from. Well, now I'm blanking on where he is from. But to have him on to come on and talk about his experience in his country. But yeah, it's good to know that 84% of you think that the recording time is not important as long as you get one a day. And that would be the intention, is that we still do 5 shows a week. Maybe we do like we did with Lertad, where we do Monday through Thursday and then Saturday. We wouldn't do that terribly often. And also, Roger and I have talked a lot about doing some guests as pre-records, because it's the only way we can get them. Some guests we can't get, or it's awkward to bring them into the live show, and we can do pre-records for those.
Yeah, and that's something we really would like to move forward on, just because one of the issues, at least with booking guests, is time, and not everyone has that same time window available to them. And having more flexibility on that front would allow us to widen our guest net, so to speak.
Yeah.
Include them in the show.
Question about pre and post show being available in video and to patrons on audio. What do you think of it? It was split into quarters. 29% enjoy it occasionally. 27% say it's not important. They could do without it. And that's why we have the regular podcast feed. 20% never miss it. And 16% didn't know it existed. 7% think it's the best part of DTNS. That is about what I expected. In fact, I expected maybe more people to say it was not important than did.
Yeah, no, it's a healthy amount. I mean, like, if you look at, a little more than a quarter say that it's not. They could do without it. But if you include the enjoy it occasionally with the never miss it, it's over 50. It's around 50%. So. And if you include the best part of DTNS and all that, it's over 50%. So it's good to know that people are also very engaged with that part of our show, because we've gotten emails or comments or questions regarding content or stuff that we've talked about either pre or post show of the actual DTNS episode.
Here's what I'm actually not going to talk about a lot. What is the one thing you think would make DTNS better? Because besides Molly Wood, we didn't really get a trend.
What are you talking about? Super Cats? Cowbell?
Yeah, but that's not a trend. Those were single. That's what I'm saying. We didn't get a lot of people saying Super Cats. No, we got things like, I think this part of the audio could be better, or I wish that the RSS feed from Patreon worked better outside of iTunes, or it was all over the place. So to me, that's good. There's lots of great ideas in here that will get me thinking and fine tuning, but it didn't seem like there was one that kept coming back. Did you think so, either of you guys?
Really, I just kind of locked in on more cowbell.
Yeah, as you would. I like less flooding of Tom's basement.
I think everyone would enjoy that.
There's people like less politics, and other people, why do you avoid politics? Which makes me think we're probably hitting exactly the right line.
Have we really done, other than talking about like FCC, stuff that actually impacts legislation that impacts how we interface with tech. It's not like we go out of our way to be a C-SPAN analytics podcast.
What is one of the things you hope DTNS never does? Stop, end, go away, take ads, quit, disappear. These are all heartening responses. Thank you. Jump the shark, cease to exist. Yeah. Switching formats to the Daily Toner news show. I can promise you that won't happen.
That would be jumping the shark.
Totally. If we intend to jump the shark, that's the way we would do it. Yeah, this is almost all. This is where you see a ton of trends, which is don't stop and don't put ads. Don't sell out. In the very important question of should we give Sawyer the dog a biscuit, a dog ice cream cone, or a massage, or more time on DTNS to express the canine perspective, overwhelmingly 38% said more time on DTNS to express the canine perspective. We'll work on that. I do leave the door open now where he can come down. He has not deigned to do that. You may have heard him barking from upstairs, though, in some episodes. Anything else on the survey? Was mostly keep up the good work and thank yous. Those are very much appreciated. And of course, have we told you lately how much you rock is good too. So yeah, obviously we didn't cover every single response on here or even a representative of every single response because a lot of them were very specific. But that gives you the gist of what we got. And I can't emphasize enough how helpful it is when we do these surveys that you guys fill them out because it really is a gut check for us. It's not like we're going to only do what's in the survey, but there are certain things that I feel certain about doing, and there are certain things that we as a team feel certain about doing. But those little things on the edge, we're like, should we cut back on top stories? Should we increase top stories? Should we change the time? Those kinds of things is really helpful to take the temperature of the audience. So thank you for that. Any other thoughts on the surveys from you guys?
Not really. I mean,
Rich?
There was a lot of really good feedback, and I think it's always helpful for me, at least, because that's the only way I can kind of get a gauge on the stuff we do and if we're doing it, to the satisfaction of the audience or not. And also because it's very easy to be very blinkered to get an idea of the topics that we are canvassing are ones that our audience is also interested in.
Rich, anything else?
I dropped off for a second, so I did not hear that last part of the conversation.
Oh, sorry. No, I just wondering if you had any last thoughts on the survey before we.
No, just it's awesome that everybody likes the show enough to give their time and give their opinion.
Clee Climber says, where can we rate the show outside of iTunes? He doesn't have an Apple ID. And wherever podcasts are listed, you can rate them in Overcast. You can rate them in Downcast. You can rate them in Pocket Casts. Yeah, wherever you're listening to the show is where I would say it's helpful to rate it.
Yeah, I think Google Play, whatever, does like thumbs up. I'm not sure if they do stars.
Yeah, you can thumb up on the YouTube, all kinds of places. So, all right. Howard wants us to add This Day in Tech History to the Daily Tech Headlines episodes. I would like to do that too, Howard. Here's the thing. That makes it a little longer, and not everybody likes it. I did an actual Today in Tech History podcast for a long time, and it only ever got close to 1,000 downloads, and it declined over time. So I use the tech history on the weekends for Daily Tech Headlines to sort of keep something in the feed and keep it from repeating on the Amazon Echo and things like that. But I don't know. I know you would like that and I would like that, but it doesn't seem like as many other people like that. I wish we could figure out a good, elegant way to roll that in. Maybe it should go into DTNS instead of Daily Tech Headlines.
We do it at the top.
Yeah.
And then today in this tech history, but what up? And then you swing into the show.
Yeah, that's something we could play around with.
And it'd be easy to put onto just the anchor feed if you just wanted to do that too.
Right.
Just
that's
the nature
true.
of that.
Because then you can just skip right past it.
Yeah,
I use it in the anchor feed on the weekends anyway. So yeah. For the single topics, Howard would like to have a couple of extra voices. He really enjoyed the episodes where Scott Johnson was asking questions, and that forced really good explanations. I don't think that 5 minutes shorter really matters to daily listening. Those are Howard's thoughts. T-Glass 1976 suggested brownies might be in the other category for pie or cake. Rob O says, headlines, banter on main stories, guest topic. I think the recent Allison Sheridan FinTech episode was kind of the perfect episode for me, where the guest dovetailed with current events.
Yeah, it's that was very serendipitous. That wasn't. I'd like to say that we kind of had a far-sighted planning for that, but it worked out well for that episode.
Howard also says, I like that Daily Tech Headlines has a lot of quick hit stories, and I almost think you could skip more of the less interesting stories at the beginning. I think he means of DTNS, but that really depends on the co-host. Justin Robert Young always has interesting commentary about every story, so make sure to leave time for him to mention Portal to Hell, hashtag Portal to Hell. Robbo says, Foss is really inside baseball and tends to be very technically siloed. That's a good point. Foss being free and open source, which if you didn't know is an example of what he's talking about. That doesn't mean I don't want to cover it, but I want to cover it in a way that is interesting to the open source fans, for lack of a better word, but also accessible to the people who don't know, because that is helpful to open source for people to say, oh, I didn't realize that existed. I didn't realize that was an option. So I try to keep my eyes out for those kind of stories. Clee Climber says, do you get analytics other than total downloads? Sort of. I mean, honestly, what we pay attention to is the Patreon and the PayPal. Those are the two main indicators of how well we're doing. Total downloads from SoundCloud and archive.org and YouTube, we keep an eye on. They're of interest. But I wanted to repeat this explanation a little at some point, and this is a good enough time. If you don't realize, the way I imagine DTNS working is this. In a normal show that's advertising supported, you're paying for the show by supporting the advertiser. So some of you get a free ride by not buying anything from the advertisers, but enough of you are buying from the advertisers that it supports the show. And what happens there is $1 you spend with the advertiser gets kept for the most part by the advertiser, and they pass a small amount of your dollar along to the show. With this model that DTNS has, we say, instead of you having to go support an advertiser to support the show and them keeping a cut of the money, why not just cut out the middleman? You can spend less money, support the show directly. We won't have to take into account the interests of a third party that's not interested in the show. They're just interested in selling to you. And everybody is happier. There are still people who can free ride the show, right? It's the same model where not everybody's supporting the show directly, but now you're supporting it directly instead of supporting the advertiser. So the important numbers to me are the Patreon numbers because of that. That make sense?
Yes, to me it does. Waiting for someone in the audience to say, yes, it makes sense.
Howard says, just FYI, the show is probably one of the best, most consistently solid podcasts I listen to. Thank you very much, Howard. That's what we strive for. By all means, that's what we're shooting for. So that's very nice to hear. Andy Beach thinks Daily Toner would make a hell of an April Fool's show. I kind of answered Steve Ice's question, I think. He asked, what means more to your stats? Is there a platform which holds more weight? Yeah, that's basically what I just answered. Clee Climber says, I didn't hear you say no to DTNS the musical.
I will say probably not, because unless you want to hear, I don't know how many of us can actually sing well. I mean, anyone can sing, but singing so other people enjoy it is a different matter entirely.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The question is not, would we say no? What would you say, please don't, please stop?
Well, the other issue is, I mean, are we just going to sing the book, or is this going to involve choreography, in which case we need to change camera setups?
For sure, yeah.
Full costuming,
Does Daily Tech Headlines just become a libretto in that situation?
Yeah, I think, well, it just becomes like a jukebox musical where we just, we're hitting that.
Or, I mean, that could be a goal. Patreon. We're gonna have to factor in
a milestone for the show. If we hit a certain level, we won't do DTNS the musical.
The musical sword of Damocles hanging over all listeners.
Clee Climber says the explanation of analytics versus advertising reminds me of broadcast versus Netflix.
In many cases, it does. Although Netflix and broadcast are slowly kind of muddying the waters a bit, especially broadcast, as some networks are trying to push into that kind of subscription model territory.
Well, maybe more radio versus Spotify, since you can get it for free.
Yes.
Public radio, I guess. Mm-hmm. Oh, wait. You're saying we're Spotify.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But we don't have to pay a license fee to everyone.
Bonus.
Yeah. Don't say, I shouldn't say that. And suddenly like Tech Meme and Google News will come knocking.
No.
Hello. Oh, this is a good question. Clee Climber. By the way, Clee Climber apparently stands for Cleveland Climber. So another one of those.
There's a lot of elevation here, so he has a lot of work cut out for him.
Is there?
No, it's so flat.
I was just thinking, like, aren't you at like river?
I thought this was like a secret fact about Cleveland I was unaware of.
It's unimaginably flat.
Isn't that what made that Cleveland or the fire on the river even more threatening? It's because back in '69. All right. He wants to know.
Yeah, go ahead.
He wants to know what a podcast network is. When you say you're part of the Frog Pants Network, what does that mean? It seems like a common website where hosts are friends with each other. Is there something more? Tom?
I don't know that Scott even really knows what the Frog Pants Network is exactly. But yeah, it's a bunch of us who want to help each other out. So Frog Pants doesn't necessarily want to be a network. It's Scott's thing. Frog Pants Network is Scott's thing. But he doesn't want it to be a thing where you have to be a member and you have to submit to Scott's control. He just wants it to be a thing where we all help each other out, but kind of like what you're saying. Hosts are friends with each other and we help each other out. So we promote each other's shows, we appear on each other's shows, and we have a central place where we can point everyone to say, hey, we're part of this network. If you like our show, maybe you'll like these other shows over here. And Diamond Club is almost even harder to explain because Diamond Club is your network, except it's not really a network, but it is kind of a network, which is all of us who are on Diamond Club are part of it, but all of you who participate in Diamond Club are part of it, and it's created and managed and developed by you, by the people in the audience. And granted, folks like T2T2 and Sergeant Muffin, Tinbeck, Myocow, and I shouldn't start naming names so I'll forget people who are very involved. There's so many of them. Are sometimes seen as maybe ringleaders or organizers, but they're seen as that just because they do something. So pretty much anybody can get in there and start doing stuff. And yet it's entirely separate from me. I don't have anything to do with it. If I want to do something on Diamond Club, I have to go to those people and say, hey, would it be cool if I did this? So that's something that I'm really proud of, that Brian and Justin and Andrew and I talked about when we first started doing these independent shows, is let's have a central place where they can pull in whatever they want, but they manage it, they run it. And so that's even more independent of us. Any other thoughts on that?
No, Robert Meta says Frog Pants is kind of like a good old-fashioned link ring.
Yeah, on steroids, I guess. It's more than just a link ring. Everybody remembers web rings. Yeah. Nobody remembers web rings.
I totally remember. That's the little thing at the bottom of a website. It's like, you should
go to the next show in the ring. Andy Beach says, I think Frog Pants is a very loose collection of podcasts, whereas other networks are truly an organized group of shows that all are produced in a very similar manner, so you sort of know what you're getting from show to show. Yeah, we don't have a format that everybody has to fit in on Frog Pants. I'm old too, Robert Meta. I'm old too. Howard remembers web rings. So does T-Glass 1976. Well, it's a self-selecting group here, isn't it? Yeah. Let's see. Have you considered enabling YouTube Super Chat? Is a question out of the IRC. We started turning off YouTube Chat because we weren't looking at it, and it was ending up just being a place where people were spamming. And so if we couldn't moderate it, my policy is if you're not going to be involved in something, you shouldn't encourage it. So we started turning it off. And to turn it on, to do YouTube Super Chat, which is where people can pay to get their chats elevated, we'd have to turn that chat back on. So I guess the short answer is no. I don't think there's. Do you guys think there's a reason to do super chat?
Everyone seems to like the IRC, so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get in there all that much, but every time I do, it's like a super awesome experience. So, and that's because people are in it and moderating it and, invested in it.
TextJeb says, where is Ace Detect reading that stuff from? It's from the analysts Slack. So that's the perk of the analysts Slack, is that you get to ask the questions on this analysts Hangout show. Gadget Chaser thinks we should bring back web rings. He loved them. Ooh, several people are typing in there.
It's a lot of web ring opinions.
What is the one change or improvement we can expect in the upcoming quarter for the show? Asks Steve I. In the upcoming quarter, what would be the one change or improvement we could expect? A lot of it is what we've been talking about. The idea of maybe some tighter shows, maybe some better selected, I'd say better selected topics. We're really working on coming up with topics that are different and interesting. I think that's the challenge that I've set, that we want to set for ourselves, right, Roger?
Definitely. I mean, having topics that are I wouldn't say unusual, but something that we don't necessarily touch on, but are just as interesting and just as impactful to the rest of us, I think would be great. And being able to do topics like that, not all the time, but enough so it does give a nice spread of ideas to various things that isn't necessarily surrounded by, security with any kind of social media platform or, processor technology or, something that's a little, I personally enjoyed the one with Annalie where we talked about basically fat grown tissue and stretching
growing human flesh on robots.
Yes. It's a fascinating topic because the end result could impact a lot of us, especially those who require any sort of any kind of transplants or stuff like that. I mean, it does spread open a wide, potentially wide benefit to medical science.
Yeah, I want to find more topics like that stand out and are perfectly legitimate, interesting, and fun to talk about. Security is one of the biggest challenges, right? Because with security, you very easily can be just covering the same thing over and over again, but yet it's obviously very important. People want to know more about it. So how do you cover it in a way that's actually helpful, useful, and interesting? That's the challenge there. And
oftentimes, I mean, we kind of jump off those from a story regarding data breach. Whether it's
that's what the news covers, right? Yeah. Is there was a data breach, and so what you end up is me saying there was a data breach. This is why you shouldn't worry too much because all the headlines are screaming at you to be afraid, and I try to balance that with there are reasons to be concerned. I'm not trying to pretend they're not, but I want to be a counterbalancing factor. Yeah. At which point then it just becomes repeating the same thing over and over again, right?
Exactly, and that's kind of where we don't want to be necessarily. But but when you get 5 different media outlets with the same trending story, even though the breach might have happened 5 years ago, it's like, well, I guess.
Steve I has a follow-up. How can we help with the refinement of the topics? What do you need from us? Thank you. Just keep the feedback coming for one thing, whether it's here in the Slack like Steve I is, or if you can't support us at the Slack level, in the IRC chat, in the emails, on the website, letting us know what you think about topics is extremely helpful. Contributing to those topics. I love when the guy wrote in, John wrote in about Cowler and his experience with using smart livestock collars. That's the kind of stuff we want. So if you're sitting there thinking what I do is boring, think about it again. If it's got technology and you don't hear us talking about it, it may not be boring. It may be that we just don't know what's happening. So that helps. And I am increasingly relying on the subreddit for interesting discussion topics. the subreddit is somewhat helpful in deciding what goes into the top stories in the daily tech headlines. I still look at it for that. It's one of the signals, but it's where we found a lot of these more interesting discussion topics that we found later. So keeping those fun and interesting discussion topics, not sensationalistic, but legitimately interesting and unusual topics, that's super helpful.
And if you could give examples of what you're talking about, for example, like, oh, can you discuss security about, yada, yada. If you could give us an example, like, oh, if you could talk about, what ports to close or whatever on my router, or any kind of good etiquette when it comes to set up a home network and things, or something like that, where you can kind of flesh it out. So we don't potentially just take the topic, but do maybe the wrong thing with it, so to speak.
Yeah, if you just like talk about routers, like that could lead us to talking about it in all kinds of different ways. So if you want us to talk about routers, what is the reason you want to talk about it? Or if it's Internet of Things, what is the reason you want to talk? Rich, you were about to say something too, I think.
Yeah. If one of the things I'm trying to do with Daily Tech Headlines, and we've talked about this, Tom, is to try and bring in some more, not unconventional sources, but stories from places that we don't hear about as often. I try and keep up on BizTech Africa. I try and look at Nikkei for more Japanese and Korean focused news, but I really don't have that great of resources for that. So if there are great publications that are reliable and that have like focused tech coverage, I really don't want to be reading like 4 or 5 Japanese newspapers every day or translations of that. But if there are good sources for for some unusual stuff, I would love to put some more headlines in. A lot of times right now we're going like, Reuters reports that Israeli news is reporting that Mobileye got sold or something like that. So it's like, I'd rather just go to the source. So
yeah, when we can. Of course, when we can't, if the report was in Hebrew or Japanese and Reuters is the place where we can read it in English, we're gonna have to do that. But yeah, the more of those other sources we have, the better.
Or if it's in the information.
T. Falstad says, I understand avoiding politics, but I'd love to see stories that reflect how tech is affecting society. I feel that's what we're doing, where we definitely talk about politics when it's actually tech. And so when it's net neutrality, when it's security policy or cybersecurity or encryption, we talk about it. When it's affecting society, when it's... Sometimes I think, and I'm not accusing T. Falstad of doing this, I think it's a legitimate suggestion, but sometimes I think people want us to talk about their political issue and they're trying to come up with a tech angle to it, right? And that's the thing I try to avoid is, you know what, that really is just politics. That really is just a diplomatic relations issue. There's nothing technologically interesting about it. It isn't going to change how we live technologically. It's not that effect. So an example of what I think T. Falstad probably means that is legitimate is taking away jobs, the automation effect on jobs. And I think that's something we could cover more and cover better. Any news on Peter Wells, says Clee Climber. Peter is going to be in the U.S. For the Samsung announcement, and he tried to get me to come out to New York and hang out with him, but I just couldn't. I couldn't do it. But yeah, he's working hard. He still has plans to launch that independent Australian focused podcast, and I believe he will. So we'll give you any more news when we have more news. But he's still working on it. T-Glass 1976, tell me more about that later on. He says, I'd like an episode that dives into a lot of the legal stuff we've seen in the news lately with a legal expert. And there are a lot of different things like that we could dive into. Some of them would just be law episodes, at which point go watch This Week in Law. They do a great job covering that. But I know there's a few of these things where the law regarding tech is a little fuzzy, and that would be interesting. Anything else, you guys?
How much for me?
War McGill says, I think tighter shows are good as long as the pre and post show stays organic. Yeah, I agree. What is the fantasy feature you would add to DTNS if money or logistics was not an issue?
I would like to do a show remotely from an international capital, like not every month, but every quarter, like DTNS on the road. That would be kind of cool.
Yeah. Jenny and I talked about in celebration of the 5th anniversary, like what could we do? Because we're coming up on 5 years in a little bit, and it's a ways off. Obviously, we just celebrated 3-year anniversary, so we're in our 4th year. But when we get into the 5th year, what do we do? And one thing I would like to do is that kind of thing, that kind of remote broadcasts from places where we have listeners, right? So wouldn't it be cool to go to Taiwan and hang out with Sean, who helps us with our video feed?
Just Sean, no one else.
Well, no, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean? Like, talk to Sean, and of course anybody else who wants to come, or go to Estonia, see if T2T2 actually is a bot or a real human being, if he'll let us.
He's just an old mainframe repurposed.
He's a cray.
His old, except his
but yeah,
googly eyes.
like come up with cool stuff. That's a fantasy thing. I totally agree. Any last thoughts from you guys before we wrap this up?
No, I have to say, of all the things I've worked on, but TV, web, cable, this audience is great. There is a tremendous amount of constructive feedback. I mean, like on the other shows I used to, where I would get feedback, but it wasn't all. There was definitely constructive, but that made up like maybe 50% of the comments. I think the DTNS audience is outstanding in being able to, give to give out critiques, but they give it and then they explain what they mean, and it's not just kind of just kind of like, oh, it sucks. It's like, oh, I didn't think that particular topic covered the actual situation enough or whatever. And I think it's great because we can't shape the show without your feedback.
Yeah, 100% agree. Rich, anything else from you?
No, I would just echo that. All the interactions I've had. I mean, again, Daily Tech Headlines by its nature gets a little less feedback, but everybody's been super constructive and helped make the show better.
Thanks everybody for all of that, for helping out and enabling us to make this show, which would not be here except for you. For those of you who support us, continue that support. We appreciate it. It means the world to us. You've changed the way we can do things, and I can't express that appreciation enough. Again, if you like these Hangouts, they happen every 3 months, not at exactly the same time. We have to work around various schedules, but every 3 months we try to do one of them. If you are helping us out at the $20 a month level, again, that's $1 a show, then you'll get advance warning of when they're happening. You'll get to have access to the Slack where you can ask questions. Not that we ignore the IRC, but that's a perk that we give folks. And everybody else can watch them on demand afterwards or send questions in advance by email at any time. And we try to just keep you up to date on how it is we do the show, what we're thinking about, and all of that sort of thing. So thanks again, and we will see you on Monday with Veronica Belmont, or the next show that you watch after you happen to stumble across this. See ya.